Hello. Hey, Portland. Today, I'm going to talk about those federated super apps that the slide was just there. A few words about me. I'm Michał Pierzchała. You can find me on GitHub or Twitter under this more readable name, Daimaiki, or however you like to call it. I'm somewhat involved in the open source area, so I've been a core contributor to Jest, to React Native CLI, to React Native testing library. I think React Native as well, mostly through the CLI contributions. As a daily job, I am a head of technology at Callstack, where we help our clients with React and React Native challenges. So one of my favorite things about React, and this contrast is not great. I didn't check that. I'm sorry. But it will get slightly better. Is that you can ship really fast. You can ship your apps and your features really fast on all the platforms that you support. And as you add new features, things start to get slower, and adding new stuff gets more time. There's more planning involved, more coding, more testing and maintenance, and naturally, you start to ship slower. Oh, I forgot this. So your managers hire more developers so you can ship faster, right? That's going to work. New teams are formed around some new features that you're adding to your applications. And as you keep on shipping, your company decides to grow even more to new markets and new regions. So they hire even more developers and adding even more features to your app. So to serve them experiences tailored to their regions and their interests. And even more teams are formed. And you start to ship even slower. So what can you do about it? Does it sound any familiar to you, by the way? I hope not, because this is not what most React Native apps are dealing with. But there is certain kind of apps that has those issues, especially if you're in a team of 30 or more engineers, and I'm saying like front-end engineers in a team. So I have to tell you that you're a super app now, and you have super problems. But what the heck is a super app? You can find many definitions online, but seriously, super app is a buzzword for really big apps that probably ship too much. I mean, they ship a lot of functionality, a lot of features under one umbrella. This functionality sometimes is related to each other, but sometimes not. Sometimes those features, those experiences are loaded dynamically, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's just a static thing in your bundle. And to some extent, I like to think about super apps as cities, organisms that live their own lives, which one person or one team cannot even control. One team can, however, control the infrastructure and guide the direction that the city is going. And this is Paris from the International Space Station. Isn't it beautiful? And a typical super app will integrate many services that are relevant to particular users, because there is likely not a single user that needs them all. And this concept is super popular in Asia for whatever reasons. For example, WeChat here. It's a chat application. It has a social network. You can pay using this app. Heck, you can even get an insurance for whatever. There's another app also from China. It's Alipay. So it's a payment app that evolved into an everything app that allows you to handle travel and shopping, and it even integrates third-party services like Uber. There's Grab. You can find it in Indonesia, Vietnam, and generally in Southern Asia. And it handles transportation, food delivery, and digital payment services. These apps are often described as everyday, everything app. Look at WeChat alone. Its feature offer is massive. And so its app size, by the way, which is around 600 megabytes on iOS. A super lot of people use those super apps. Apparently, this is what people want in the East, right? But guess what? It's not only Asia. We have super apps in the West, like Uber, for example. Uber offers ride-hailing, scooters, and food delivery. Everything but around delivering stuff. We have Revolut, which has everything around money and finances. In Poland, we have Allegro, which is an e-commerce app where you can buy virtually anything. And there's even Facebook, which offers services around social networks, like marketplace or dating, and probably a lot of others that I'm not even aware of. These apps also serve billions of users. It's just that in the West, these services are usually around a single theme instead of being very, very different from each other. So now that we know our app is a super app with super problems, what can I do about my time to ship? To make it smaller, by the way. So before jumping into solutions or conclusions, it's worth to realize that in fact we're dealing with organizational issues. We deal with excessive communication, onboarding, conflicts, who owns who, and sharing resources. These are not typical programming problems. These are organizational problems. And similar to cities that grow and expand, it's time to organize and introduce some first-class infrastructure. You can decentralize ownership and deployment and more. And I never became an architect, but I very much liked to be one in my teams, and for various reasons. But the real reason was money. But now I can architect software, so yay for me, I guess. Maybe I'm not building physical things, but who cares? So organization of large teams is generally solved in the server world with microservices. Of course, it's not a silver bullet solution, but it has its upsides and places where it works. And since humans are great at copying and learning from each other, we have micro frontends on the web. So isn't the React core team telling us that it would be nice to share experiences between different platforms and learn from each other? So for example, when working on a new architecture, the core team ported Android implementation of view flattening into a shared C++ layer. So now it's accessible to iOS and to virtually any other platform that implements new architecture. And they have the support almost for free. One platform learning from another. So similarly, we as React developers bring web technologies that power React into the mobile world. So maybe we could bring micro frontends to the native. Would it make sense, by the way? Let's think about it. To bring true micro frontends to mobile platforms, we need dynamic code delivery because we don't want to ship users code that they don't use. We're not those kinds of apps. Android supports it in the form of feature delivery, which is quite limited and not generally encouraged by the platform owners. It's like a workaround for specific problems of the platform. And both platforms, however, support web views. And web views can load our content dynamically from the web. And this is what Uber and Alipay are doing, and what's possible with Ionic portals, for example. It has its benefits. However, with React Native, we can do better. We can have native platform look and feel. So we can leverage the fact that both those platforms can run a hybrid JavaScript framework like React Native that's able to load JavaScript over the air and run it and update it in runtime. Thank you, JavaScript, for running everywhere. So for convenient content delivery, we need a bundler that supports automated code splitting and async bundle loading. So today it's kind of possible to do it with Metro. There's nothing preventing us from implementing that in the user space. It's also probably implemented somewhere at Meta, but maybe they just didn't tell us yet about it. And on the other hand, there are bundlers that have the first-class support for async chunk and async code loading, like Webpack, for example. And here I would love to tell you how we brought async code loading to Metro. But it turns out that 6 years ago, at Callstack, we created Hall, which is an alternative CLI for React Native that uses Webpack as a bundler. And both React Native and Webpack are so flexible that it was possible to integrate them, despite that React Native has a tight connection with Metro. Isn't this amazing, by the way, to have this diversity of tools supporting React Native? We can use that and not reinvent the wheel. It also turned out that Hall is not that great. It lacks proper hot module replacement support, and it struggled with adding fast refresh that Metro introduced first for React Native. So this is one thing that React Native got first before React. Yay. It's also challenging to support Webpack 5 with Hall. So with one of its most anticipated features from our point of view, which is module federation. I told you that web solved micro frontends, but I didn't tell you the obvious thing. There is no single solution, and they all have trade-offs. They're all not perfect. We believe that module federation is currently the solution that offers the best developer experience. And it introduces separate builds for the same app, allowing for more independent deployments, independent teams, and sharing code between apps, not only the modules, without ever touching NPM to do so. The creator of Module Federation shares similar experiences, and where we couldn't keep up with shipping pace that we had in the past. And he was also kind enough to speak about it at our podcast, the React Native Show, which I'll shamelessly plug here. And yeah, to implement Module Federation in React Native, we had to rewrite Hall from scratch with first principles in mind. And that's how Repack was born, by shifting more responsibility to the users and leveraging the plugin system of the React Native CLI that we just rebuilt at the time as the React Native CLI team. We could focus on bringing necessary web-compatible Webpack plugins like the Module Federation plugin to React Native. With Repack, we can develop what we call federated super apps, optimized for highly distributed teams, independent deployments, and delivering only the JavaScript that users really need. Thanks to Repack, our app can still grow in functionality that's relevant only to particular users without having all the users pay the cost of the app size. And at the same time, it allows for small, lean teams that can work in isolation on their features, also called mini apps, even in separate repositories. The teams can choose whether to run a full app or just work in scope environment in isolation. We found that most developers prefer the isolation, which allows for faster feedback loop, onboarding, and less distractions. However, it's not required to use separate repositories. There are teams that thrive in monorepos and can handle its complexities. And there's quite an even split in monorepo proponents and polyrepo users, and Module Federation supports both at the same time. What's important here is that it's for the teams to be able to deploy their code at their own pace without being blocked by other teams. And for the host app to be able to pick the versions that are compatible with itself and that it can load over the air. And to ensure that host app loads the code that you actually write, not tampered by bad actors, Repack signs all the remote JavaScript bundles, similar to how Code Push is doing that. It's automated, and you're the ones in control. It's almost like developing for the web browser. Think about it. Your users can get the latest versions of your features, latest bug fixes, and without doing anything, without upgrading the app, and without redownloading the whole bundle as it happens with Code Push. And this bundle can get up to 40 megabytes for apps like Discord, for example. And picking the correct version of the apps, the mini apps, requires coordination with a server that serves the bundles and automates the deployment. And Module Federation in React Native requires some runtime setup as well. And since Repack is bare bones toolkit of Webpack plugins and loaders, we recently open sourced a showcase for you to try it, providing all the necessary wiring for a federated super app. Check the experience, run it locally, read through the code, and hopefully you will be able to unblock your team and ship fast again with this. If you want to try it in your app, run the init command or follow the getting started instructions. And this feature was actually shipped yesterday. So kudos to the team that actually shipped this. Thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Rafix. You're great. Oh, and I forgot running the actual command. Yeah, this is how it looks. And next step, it would be to set up the Module Federation plugin for your host app and for your mini application that you picked. Expose the screens from the mini app using the exposes key. Tell the Repack where to fetch the mini apps from, the actual endpoint, and lazy load using suspense to avoid cascading spinners. And voila, our mini app is now lazy loaded. So look how we have our mini app container bundle already there in our app. However, the main navigation chunk that we federated is downloaded on demand as we access the mini application without being a part of the main bundle. So your product shouldn't ship slower just because it's big. Repack and Module Federation can rewire your teams and change the way they work for better. And what's most important, ship faster again. Of course, there are some gotchas and trade-offs. For example, this is for really big teams only. We rarely see teams smaller than 30 people that need this kind of architecture. Such teams have often their own implementations, their own solutions to those problems. And with Repack, we aim to give them a chance to outsource their custom solution to an open source library. You need an infra team that handles all the wiring, dependencies, upgrades, version compatibility. It's a full-time job. You need those people to handle your infrastructure. Many apps are pure JavaScript, so they can't load their own native code. Only use the one that's shipped with your host app. So you cannot. So we are actually shipping some code that's not gonna be used by the users. But at least we don't ship unnecessary JavaScript. That's a plus. And App Store won't like you shipping new features without them knowing. So you might be cautious around this topic as well. So to recap, super apps are just big apps shipping loads of features for everyone, usually statically or using web views. Federated super apps are optimized for dynamic feature delivery and shipping only the necessary code to your users. Code that renders fully native experiences thanks to React Native. And they use Repack and Module Federation to orchestrate the building and releasing modules independently. And all this dynamic code is code signed. Both monorepo and poly repos are supported. And we have a reference showcase repo for you to try. Coming to an end, I'd like to thank Chin React and Infinite Red, and especially Jamin and Gant for inviting us and inviting me and my friends at Callstack. I hope that we see each other again in beautiful Wrocław in Poland during the React Native EU conference that we organize in September. You're all invited, and there is a discount code. And yeah, thank you all here. This conference was a blast. It's my first time in Portland, first time at Chin React, one of the best conferences I've been already. Thank you.